6 words from a 16-year-old girl stopped Steve Harvey mid-sentence and changed everything. Emma Rodriguez stood at the Family Feud podium, her secret growing heavier by the moment, about to reveal something that would shatter her family and transform a game show into a moment of raw truth. What happened next proved that some confessions can't wait for the right time or place. It was a bright Friday afternoon at the Family Feud studios in Atlanta. The Rodriguez family from Phoenix was competing against the Patterson family from Miami. The atmosphere was electric, with the usual energy of families ready to battle for prize money and bragging rights. Emma Rodriguez stood at the end of her family's podium, trying to blend into the background. She was 16 years old with long dark hair that she'd curled specially for the show and wore a loose-fitting purple sweater that she'd chosen very carefully. To everyone watching, she looked like a typical teenager excited to be on television. But Emma was carrying a secret that felt heavier than the world itself. For 3 months, she had been hiding the fact that she was pregnant. At 16, she was terrified, confused, and completely alone with a truth that grew bigger every day. The Rodriguez family had been selected for Family Feud during what should have been the happiest time in Emma's life. Her father Miguel was a hard-working mechanic, her mother Rosa was a devout Catholic who volunteered at their church, and her older brother Carlos was home from college for the summer. They were a tight-knit family with traditional values and high expectations for their children. What they didn't know was that their youngest daughter was 3 months pregnant by her boyfriend Tyler, a boy they'd forbidden her to see. Emma had been hiding morning sickness as stomach flu, loose clothing as a fashion choice, and doctor's appointments as after-school activities. The weight of her secret was crushing her. Every family dinner became an exercise in deception. Every hug from her mother felt like a betrayal. Every conversation about her future felt like a lie she was living. Steve had noticed Emma during the family introductions. She seemed quieter than most teenagers on the show, more withdrawn. When he'd asked her about school, she'd given short answers with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What are you most excited about in life, Emma?" Steve had asked with his characteristic warmth. "Just finishing school," she'd replied, her voice barely audible. The weight of knowing she might not graduate on time because of her condition made even that simple answer feel like a lie. Steve had sensed something was off, but couldn't quite put his finger on it. There was a heaviness to Emma that seemed unusual for someone her age, on what should be one of the most exciting days of her life. The game progressed through the first 2 rounds with typical Rodriguez family energy. Miguel was competitive and loud, Rosa was strategic and careful with her answers, and Carlos brought the college humor that kept everyone laughing. Emma had barely participated, only speaking when directly called upon. During the 3rd round, the atmosphere shifted in ways no one could have anticipated. Steve announced the category with his usual enthusiasm, completely unaware that he was about to touch the deepest nerve of a frightened teenager. "We surveyed 100 people. Top 6 answers are on the board. Name something you're hiding." The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Around Emma, her family immediately started thinking of harmless answers. Surprise parties, birthday gifts, small white lies that families tell each other, normal secrets that normal families keep. But Emma felt like the question had been aimed directly at her heart. For 3 months, she had been hiding the biggest secret of her young life. Every morning she woke up hoping it was a nightmare. Every night she went to sleep terrified of what tomorrow might bring. Rosa, Emma's mother, buzzed in first with confidence. "Surprise parties," she said, earning a good response from the audience and the number 3 spot on the board. Carlos went next with Christmas presents, which earned the number 5 position. Miguel tried money, but it wasn't on the board. The control passed to the Patterson family, who managed to find 2 more answers before striking out. Now it was Emma's turn. She had been dreading this moment since the game began, knowing that eventually she would have to step up to that podium and answer a question. The studio lights felt impossibly bright, the audience noise overwhelming. Steve smiled at her encouragingly as she approached the podium. "Emma, your family needs one more answer to stay in control. Name something you're hiding." Emma stared at the board, her hands trembling as she gripped the podium. Around her, her family was whispering suggestions. Diary, bad grades, boyfriend. Innocent teenage secrets that felt like jokes compared to what she was carrying. But Emma wasn't thinking about winning the game anymore. She wasn't thinking about prize money or television strategy. She was thinking about the doctor's appointment she'd had that morning, the ultrasound photo hidden in her backpack, and the baby that was growing inside her every day. The silence stretched longer than usual. Steve noticed her hesitation and stepped closer, his expression becoming more concerned than entertainer-focused. "Take your time, sweetheart. What are you hiding?" Emma looked up at Steve, then at her family, then back at Steve. The weight of 3 months of deception, fear, and isolation suddenly became unbearable. The studio lights, the cameras, the audience, none of it mattered anymore. Only the truth mattered. When Emma spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the complete silence of the studio, every word carried like thunder. "A baby that's coming in 3 months." The words hung in the air like a confession at church. The studio fell completely silent. Emma's family turned to stare at her in complete shock. Rosa's hand flew to her mouth. Miguel's face went pale. Carlos looked like he'd been slapped. Steve Harvey, who had heard thousands of answers to thousands of questions over his career, found himself completely speechless. This wasn't a game show answer. This was a 16-year-old girl's life imploding on national television. "Emma," Steve said softly, setting down his cards and moving closer to her. "Sweetheart, did you just say what I think you said?" Emma nodded, tears now streaming down her face. The floodgates had opened, and there was no going back. "I'm pregnant. I'm 16 and I'm pregnant, and I've been hiding it for 3 months because I'm terrified." The camera operators continued filming, but everyone in the studio understood they were witnessing something far more important than entertainment. This was a young girl's world changing in real time. Behind Emma, her mother Rosa was crying. Not tears of joy or celebration, but tears of shock and confusion. Miguel looked like he was trying to process information that didn't compute. Carlos seemed frozen, unsure whether to protect his sister or comfort his parents. "How long have you known?" Steve asked gently, his voice stripped of all performance. 3 months, Emma whispered. "I found out the week before we got selected for the show. I've been hiding it this whole time. I didn't know how to tell them." Steve looked back at Emma's family, then back at her. In 40 years of television, he'd never encountered a moment quite like this. But somehow, he knew exactly what to do. "Emma, look at me," Steve said, his voice firm but kind. "You don't have to hide anymore. You don't have to carry this alone." But Emma wasn't finished. 3 months of fear and isolation came pouring out in words that cut straight to her heart. "I'm so scared," she said, her voice breaking completely. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be a mom. I don't even know if I'm ready to be a mom. But I'm having this baby, and I'm terrified, and I've been pretending everything is normal when nothing is normal." The honesty was devastating. Here was a child admitting she was about to become a mother. And she was doing it in front of millions of people because the weight of secrecy had become too much to bear. Steve walked closer to Emma and, without hesitation, put his arms around her in a protective embrace. "Sweetheart, being scared doesn't make you weak. Being scared makes you human." Over Emma's shoulder, Steve could see her family struggling to process this revelation. Rosa was torn between wanting to comfort her daughter and grappling with her own shock. Miguel looked like he was cycling through anger, disappointment, and worry in rapid succession. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Steve said, addressing Emma's mother directly, "your daughter just showed incredible courage. She's been carrying this alone for 3 months because she was afraid. But she's not alone anymore." Rosa stood up slowly and walked toward the podium. Her face was wet with tears, but when she reached Emma, she pulled her daughter into her arms without hesitation. "Mija," Rosa whispered, "why didn't you tell me? Why did you think you had to hide this?" "Because I knew you'd be disappointed," Emma sobbed into her mother's shoulder. Because I knew I messed up, because I was scared you'd hate me. I could never hate you, Rosa said, her voice thick with emotion. Never. You're my baby. Miguel and Carlos had joined them now, the family forming a circle around Emma. The competition, the game, the television show, none of it mattered anymore. This was about family, about love, about supporting each other through the hardest moments. Steve addressed the Patterson family, who had been watching this unfold with obvious emotion. Patterson family, I hope you understand that this game has become something bigger than competition. The Patterson family matriarch, a grandmother from Miami, stepped forward immediately. Steve, that young lady needs her family right now. Games can wait. But Steve wasn't done. He turned to address the cameras directly, speaking to the millions of people who would eventually watch this moment. For any young person watching this who is carrying a secret that feels too heavy to bear, you are not alone. For any parent watching this, remember that love is stronger than disappointment. This is what family looks like when it matters most. He turned back to Emma, who was still wrapped in her mother's arms. Emma, I want you to know something. What you did today took more courage than most adults show in a lifetime. You told your truth when it was the hardest thing in the world to do. Emma looked up at Steve through her tears. I don't feel very courageous. I feel like I messed up everything. Listen to me very carefully, Steve said, kneeling down to meet her eyes. Making mistakes doesn't make you a bad person, it makes you human. And the way you handle those mistakes, that's what shows who you really are. The conversation that followed wasn't captured fully by the cameras. Steve spoke with Emma and her family about resources for teen mothers, about the importance of continuing her education, about the support systems available to help young families. Rosa held Emma's hand throughout the conversation. We'll figure this out together, she kept saying. We're family, we figure things out together. Miguel, who had been quiet through most of the revelation, finally spoke up. Emma, I'm not going to lie and say I'm not shocked. But you're my daughter. That baby is going to be my grandchild. We'll make this work. The episode that aired 6 months later became one of the most talked about Family Feud episodes in history. But more importantly, it sparked national conversations about teen pregnancy, family support, and the importance of open communication between parents and children. Emma received thousands of supportive letters from viewers, many from other teenage mothers who thanked her for her honesty. Organizations dedicated to supporting young mothers saw increases in both funding and volunteer applications. But the real change happened within the Rodriguez family itself. The secret that had been poisoning Emma's relationship with her parents became the foundation for a new kind of honesty and openness. Emma gave birth to a healthy baby girl 6 months after the episode was filmed. She named her Sophia, which means wisdom. Because, as Emma said, this whole experience taught me that hiding from truth only makes everything harder. Rosa became the devoted grandmother she'd always dreamed of being, just sooner than anyone had planned. Miguel built a crib with his own hands and declared himself Grandpa Mike to anyone who would listen. Emma finished high school on schedule with the help of online classes and a determination to prove that teenage motherhood didn't have to mean the end of her dreams. She graduated valedictorian of her alternative education program. Steve kept in touch with the Rodriguez family throughout Emma's pregnancy and beyond. When Sophia was born, he sent a bouquet of flowers with a note that read, "Welcome to the world, Sophia. Your mama is one of the bravest people I've ever met." Today, Emma is 21 years old and studying early childhood education at Arizona State University. Sophia is a bright, happy 5-year-old who knows that her mama was very young when she was born, but was loved from the very first moment. The Rodriguez family still watches that Family Feud episode together every year on Sophia's birthday, not because they want to relive the shock and fear, but because they want to remember the moment their family chose love over judgment, support over shame. That was the day we learned that family isn't about being perfect, Rosa often says. It's about being there for each other when everything is imperfect. Emma's story resonated far beyond that Family Feud studio. She became an advocate for comprehensive sex education and support for young mothers. She speaks at high schools about the importance of honest communication with parents and the reality that mistakes don't define your future. The secret that nearly destroyed Emma's relationship with her family became the foundation for a deeper, more honest connection than they'd ever had before. The shame that had isolated her for 3 months transformed into a story of courage that inspired thousands of other young people facing similar challenges. Steve Harvey learned something that day that changed how he approaches every contestant who seems to be carrying more than they can handle. "Sometimes people don't need entertainment," he said in later interviews. "Sometimes they need permission to tell their truth." And Emma Rodriguez, who spent 3 months believing that honesty would destroy her family, learned that the truth, even when it's terrifying, has the power to heal what secrets can only wound. Because that's what love looks like. That's what family sounds like. And that's what happens when a 16-year-old girl discovers that the truth she was afraid to tell was exactly what her family needed to hear. Sofia Rodriguez may have been unplanned, but she was never unloved. And thanks to her mother's moment of courage on national television, she'll grow up knowing that honesty, even when it's hard, is always the right choice.